I start with this slide because all of my work starts from an experience, usually out in the world, in nature. This is the Sculptural bathhouse, the site of the former Sculptural bathhouse, which was a huge bathhouse, I think in 1896 was when it opened, out near Land's End, in a cliff house area. And it was a series of 7 pools. All of them were controlled by the tides, or I guess the tides were what, recycled the water. And it was a great spectacle and entertainment. At the time, it got unpopular quickly after it was opened. And if any of you have been there, it's a really beautiful site, and you can still see all the ruins. And I think now it's more of a park where you can hike around. And this site had a pretty profound impact on me, maybe 13 years ago when I first visited, and it was because, A, we don't see a lot of ruins in the United States, especially in California, and there's something fascinating about the history and trying to figure out what happened there. And I subsequently learned about the history of the Sculptural bathhouses after I visited. And B, the immense presence of the tides at this site and sort of this cyclical process that's a natural process that is ongoing and slowly, initially was harnessed for the use of humans for bathing and now has slowly been taking these ruins back into the ocean. So my work is very research-based. And when I start to do research, it usually is through the lens of the society in which I grew up, which is scientific in nature and quantification. And when I was wondering about the tides at this particular site, I discovered the historic tide database that the NOAA makes accessible online. And you can search tide data going back to when many of these stations were operating. So I found the information for the San Francisco Tide Station, which is actually the longest operating tide station in the country. You can source the data back since it's been started. And when you quantify something as immense and beautiful as the tides into measurements, it looks like this. So when you reduce that to data, this is literally a timestamp of the day and time. They take the water level every 6 minutes, and you get a table of numbers. This doesn't capture how I feel about the tides. So I use this as a starting point in my work to create artwork that is a physical presence that gives that effect and the feeling that I feel when I'm in nature, or in places where nature and humans intersect. When you take that data and visualize it, there's many different ways to visualize it, but the NOAA uses a graph like this, and that is 1 day, 24 hours of tides at the same station. So the numbers we just saw turned into a line like this. And the tides are based on the moon cycle. So if you take 28, 29 tides, daily tide charts, and layer them, you get a full cycle of tidal patterns. So there's 2 highs and 2 lows every day. And I took those charts and layered them and traced them, and I created this tornado pattern, which was the beginning of the project that I then turned into a 3-dimensional object. So I really like the physical presence of an object and what meaning can be conveyed through physical materials. And that's really where my art comes in. I have a degree in furniture design, and I choose not to make functional objects, mostly because function isn't enough of an interest for me, and I'm more interested in the meaning that one can convey through a medium. So from the initial idea and the research, I go through a process of design to try and convey the meaning of what those forms are and what data is embedded in this form so that there's no numbers. It's not an analytic experience, it's really a physical experience with the body. So someone can walk around this and that information is made accessible in a different format. So this is the finished piece of San Francisco tide data that I've created, and there's a few different views. So why do I use data in my work? I'm trying to get to knowledge, perhaps wisdom someday. I have an immense curiosity with the world, and data is a reduction and a quantification of everything that we have around us, but it's not limited to any idea. It allows me to research anything and try and find facts and use them in whatever way I want to convey into a concept that has maybe layered meanings. What we're at now is we have so much data, an immensity of it. It seems to be we want to quantify everything. And what I feel is that we lose the ability to turn that into knowledge because we're just swimming in data and information, but none of it's actually being applied to any meaning that we can then synthesize into something that can affect our daily lives or change our behaviors. All quantitative data is subject to qualitative judgments. I became an artist because I don't like rules, I don't like authority, and I like to do whatever I want. And I use science, but I use it to my own means. And in my experience in using science in my work and data in my work, I find some limitations within those systems, and that's where that quote comes from. I think within the field of science there's hierarchies, and there's gender gaps, and there's a lot of bias, perhaps implicit, and I think that that's important to recognize when you're using science in your work, so I include it in the talk in that way. I also don't use data, I'm fairly critical of how data is represented in society as well. I think there's a lot of misuse of data, sometimes just for purely aesthetic, show-off, where the meaning is completely convoluted because of a confusion of how to represent it in a way that people can understand. So I try to avoid that in my work. I also see a lot of misrepresentations and maybe manipulation of data, such as a pie chart that doesn't add up to 100%. And there's a lot of examples of these. And I find all of these things very confusing because data can be represented in any way, and as soon as something is represented, it is no longer objective. It becomes a subjective experience. So I don't follow any of those particular rules in the way that I make my art, and I've come to the conclusion that data does not equal truth, and I don't think we should accept it as so. And this is why art is the medium I use to convey my ideas. I think it can embody some of the value in science and information and quantification, but it can take it a few steps further and allow an emotional response and allow a human element that can help us get to a more knowledgeable place. This is a quote I do quite like. Reason's last step is the recognition that there are an infinite number of things which are beyond it. And in this progression, it was kind of a silly graphic. We've got data, we've got information, I see presentation as part of that, and people are often confused by what the knowledge part of this analogy, this metaphor is. And I think that the knowledge part really is the experience of eating the cake, and that's the synthesized learning, that's like the taste and the flavor and the texture and how you physically experience it. And that's really why art is what I'm using to get to a knowledgeable place of trying to apply all of the research and the ideas that I encounter in my work and synthesize that into a form that brings it all together as a physical experience. This is a quote: "Stop thinking about artworks as objects and start thinking about them as triggers for experience." So I focus on the experience quite a bit, and I've really been profoundly influenced by John Dewey, who wrote this book called Art as Experience. He was working in the 1930s, a really wonderful philosopher. And he proposes that when we think of art, we tend to think of art objects, and this is a mistake. So he's proposing that art is actually what connects two experiences. One is the experience of the artist and the making of the work, and the second part of that is the perception of the work after it's created. And the art is what connects those two things, but it's not the object itself that matters. It's what it does in the act of making it and to the perceiver that perceives it afterwards. Let's talk about some of my biases. I grew up in Colorado at the base of this beautiful mountain, and I love the feeling of being in snow, and it's one of the inspirations I find in life that I've used in the piece I'm going to show you. When you quantify snow, it looks like this. This is the snow water equivalent. It's a chart that shows how much water is in the snowpack for 1 year. It goes from September to October because that's how they measure most winter-based water counting systems. And you can see there's a slow buildup as it snows, and then there's a peak, and then it kind of drops off, and the summer's all flat. So I've sourced a whole bunch of these graphs from a particular site. I think they went back about 31 years for this piece. And then trying to figure out how I can transform those into a form that really shows a long-term trend or a pattern that you can feel with your body. This is some of the fabrication technique I'm using for this piece specifically. Some more carving and grinding and layering, and this is the finished piece. It's actually a cabinet, and I made a functional object in this case because I wanted to draw the connection between snow and the beautiful patterns that that come out of it when it's this storage system that's naturally there for us. It's not just for us. It's a way that nature stores water in the winter and then releases it in the summer in these cyclical patterns that are annual. And the way that we store things are in cabinets. And so I made a cabinet that has drawers where every drawer is a different size. And the size of the drawer depends on how much water we have available in the snowpack for that year. So if there was a very dry year, there was very little storage. And I like drawing the correlation between how humans use things, what we store, and the bigger picture. I'm really interested in things that are greater than myself and a human life. So this was a piece that isn't super functional, but has a function in it that's tied to the concept. I've done a piece that has to do with river meanders. Many of my works are about capturing change over time because I often wonder what things look like long ago and then what they might look like in the future. I was in Portland for an artist residency and was connected with the USGS Oregon Water Science Center. They were able to provide me with these LiDAR scans of a particular river called the Molalla River in southeast Oregon, and I took these scans and translated them and sort of interpolated the in-between years since they only had charts for every 5 years, so scans for every 5 years. I then go through a fabrication process, cut them all up into plywood in this case, and then I've created a form that shows a river captured in time as its meander has changed. So this is, I think, 15 years of the Molalla River, and particularly one new section. There was a flood that happened between 2005 and 2009, so this extra arm of the river was created and is conveyed in the form there. You may have noticed there's a theme of water happening, and I've also made a few pieces that don't directly have to do with water, but perhaps the lack thereof it. I did a residency last year in San Diego and also was around during the Rim Fire, which was in 2013, which was the third largest fire in California. And I was actually in Tahoe when this fire was happening and when it doubled in size overnight. And the smoke, even though we were that far away from Yosemite, was bad enough that we left because it was very intense. And you wake up and there's this like orange sky from how much particulate matter has blown into the valley from this very large fire. And that definitely incited an inspiration of learning more about this. So this is a satellite imagery of the Rim Fire as it progressed. And while I was in San Diego, I learned about the largest wildfire in California history, which was called the Cedar Fire. And when you start to look up how they study and track fires, this is what you get. This is a fire progression map. It's got timestamps and it shows you the perimeter as it's grown and moved over time. A lot of the way that it moves has to do with wind and geography. And I've taken that map and I've created a three-dimensional form by making time another dimension. So if we've got space as one dimension, if you expand out those perimeters and show where the fire was growing at different points in time, you get a form like this. And I think what's really important about something like this is that in society, we perceive wildfire as this very destructive force that is a bad thing that destroys homes. And I think that that's a very one-sided view that's only considering how humans are affected by that fire. But in fact, fire is a really, really important part of the natural environment. And by conveying a beautiful form, and maybe not everyone thinks that's a beautiful form, but I think it reveals something about a fire that maybe can change a perspective about what that means, and if it is really a destructive force, or if there's something we're missing. I'm going to show one more piece that was inspired by some time I spent in Homer, Alaska. I did a residency up there maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And this is a glacier. That's me collecting water at this glacial lake. It's called the Gruink Glacier, and while I was there, I was able to partner with some scientists who were studying how glaciers retreat, and they don't actually have great data on the mass that's been lost in glaciers. So the best data they have for most glaciers is how much the perimeter has changed over time. So he provided me with maps that he was using to study how these glaciers are retreating with different timestamps. And literally, that photo of me was maybe on that part of the lake. You can camp there. You have to take a boat to get there, and it's not accessible by road or plane. It's a really beautiful site. I then took those maps and translated them into a form that shows ephemerally how they've changed shape over time. It's not a literal representation of the glacier. It's an ephemeral kind of piece, and then I created as a model of it. I created a mold, and then I did an ice cast sculpture and filmed it as it melted throughout an entire day, and that's what you're seeing here as a time lapse. That's all I've got for you.